Hello, everybody. My name is Matt Webster. I'm the founder, CEO, and CISO for Cyvergence. Today, we're going to look at third-party risk management, and this is part 3 of an ongoing series. Let's go ahead and jump into it a little bit further, though. We're going to take a look at up to 5 different levels. These are my interpretations of levels of things when things get a little bit more serious as you start to get into the higher levels for what those risk assessments look like. We're going to take a look at some combinations and blending of things. And as we go through it, keep in mind that different companies are going to use different aspects of things based on the level of third-party risk that they perceive related to your organization. So the agenda, where the 2 sections we're going to cover are third-party risk management, a look at deeper assessments, and briefly a look at the Cyvergence series. So this is part of an ongoing series. If you are not overly familiar with third-party risk, I do recommend maybe going back and watching part 1 and part 2. I think that's going to be very helpful. And there are more topics that are coming up in the future, so keep that in mind. I do assume you have a little bit of cybersecurity knowledge, but you don't need to be an expert. Also, keep in mind, it might seem a little bit strange today, a couple of the items that we touch on, that this is not textbook knowledge. It's based on real world experiences. These are things that I have actually encountered in organizations as part of the third party risk. Either I have done them or others have done them. So these are not things that are not unheard of, but there's some of you who have been around the block who might wonder about them because they're going to seem a little bit unusual, especially for those who have not been in highly regulated environments. So keep in mind, just because they're here, I'm not advocating for them. I'm just letting you know that they're out here. Because the reality is security is not a one size fits all. There's so many different approaches you can take. And I think the approach that best fits the organization is the best way to approach things. So let's dive into third-party risk management deeper assessments. So level 1, we've kind of already covered. This is the questionnaire, the attack surface management, and dark web. Level 2 is when you kind of start to blend these different approaches. And this is very common in a lot of organizations. Especially if you've got a questionnaire approach, you get to ask some additional questions and there's some value to that. But it's tough to get a questionnaire done every single time you purchase it or, checking on these things on a regular basis. You might have to sit back and say, well, you know what? ASM, attack surface management, makes so much more sense to use to validate the security of their organization on a regular basis. So just keep in mind that there's a lot of reasons. You might find insurance companies are going to go back and double check them or see something on the dark web or check on these kind of things. So there are some options out there that you're going to find that different companies may take. So level 3, this is where you get into testing and validation. These are things like penetration testing or controls testing. But the other thing is you might find upon occasion are continual validations. Now, a lot of times this ties in with newsworthy items that might be popping up for your organization. And what's interesting about that is, let's say there's, let's say Log4j, which came out, which did surprise a lot of people, like, hey, what's going on here? They want to know, did you actually mitigate all the risks that are in your organization, or have you eliminated them or mitigated them in different ways? So you might have to provide a response for other organizations. They'll contact you and say, hey, let's find out what's actually going on. Let's find out what's going on. And you'll need to let them know, hey, by the way, we did take care of that. We are a responsible corporate citizen. So these are some options kind of that level 3. They might check your penetration testing report. They may check your control testing and seeing what's going on and just to get some additional information. But that's really that testing and validation is at the level 4. Now, assurance is getting to yet another step. This is where the company doesn't trust your pen testing report, so they have to do it themselves because they've got more crack pen testers as they feel. So they're going to go check your organization and perform pen testing in order to make sure that you're doing things in the right way. And this could come up as a result of a particular case or situations that may pop up. They're going to want to know what that context is. They also may do control assessments. They may come out and visit you and say, hey, we want to see your controls in action. Let's validate that it's being done the right way. It's not uncommon to find that, but especially the more regulated, the better chance this is going to take place. But it just depends on a lot of different factors. In some cases, I've seen attestations of security compliance. They want to know the controls are done. Just because an audit framework or compliance framework says you've got to do X, well, you've got to say, well, did you do this for the entire organization or only in scope of the corporate assessment, of the compliance assessment? And so these are ways that you can go through and do things. You have to put an attestation in place that you have done the security properly and meet their level of needs as part of an organization. So these are extra levels, and that attestation, it's got a legal thing to it because somebody's going to be signing off on it. Coincidentally or incidentally, from New York Department of Financial Services, they have a requirement there that the CEO and the CISO sign off on the level of security for an organization. That's sort of the same thing as what I've been talking about here, but the regulatory agency is an agency and not an individual company assessing your risk. But it's all kind of the same sort of thing when you start to take a look at it. Now, level 5, this is unusual, but I've seen it once. I have not seen this a tremendous number of times, where key cybersecurity decisions are made by an external company. You are essentially handing over the governance that you have in place. You have a chief information security officer, but they still decide they may need to hand over all cybersecurity decisions to another organization. And usually this is associated with risk. And the higher the risk, the more likely they're able to do that. For example, if they're going to be handing you data, especially all of their data, they're going to want to make sure that you're doing the right thing from a governance perspective. And that's where there can be a huge burden for organizations because sometimes they're not going to allow things to take place unless there's a level of security that they deem acceptable for the organization. And that's a really big concern to have for organizations. It's not something I recommend unless you are the one who are deciding somebody doesn't have appropriate level of security. But I've seen it from a contractual perspective and third-party risk. So it is another part that we're going to cover at a later point in time. But this is definitely a very serious step for any company to take to hand over that governance. We'll take a look at the Cybergent services. Basically, we do third-party risk management. There's some other stuff that we do, but what's really more important is if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. That's what I'm looking for. I'm on LinkedIn all the time, so I'm happy to have a conversation. You can go to the website, cybergence.biz. If you like this presentation, you think it's useful, follow us on YouTube, find out more what's going on. We're on a few other sites as well. Definitely feel to reach out, and I want to thank you very much for your time.